The mock 10 from Ryan Wilson. He has the Jags taking Aiden Hutchinson, number 1. How about the Giants there in the mock draft? They move up to 2 in a mock trade with the Detroit Lions as the Giants get Kayvon Thibodeau at number 2. And the first quarterbacks go 9 and 10. Matt Corral to Washington, 9. Kenny Pickett to the Atlanta Falcons, 10. Ryan Wilson joins us now, along with Brady Quinn and Danny Cannell. Ryan, compared to most years, how much does it really matter who gets the 1 spot, who gets the 2 spot, if it's Jacksonville or Detroit?
Well, if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars, you don't want the 1 spot. And, they sort of that was their Super Bowl yesterday in a lot of ways. And they blew it because they had an opportunity to win 1 more game, get to 3 wins, and perhaps move out of that 1 spot for good. Last year they had the number 1 pick, and that's exactly what they wanted because they got Trevor Lawrence. But we've talked, every week in this segment that the quarterback class ain't great. So if you're stuck at number 1, the 2 best players are Aiden Hutchinson and Kayvon Thibodeau. Perhaps you could talk yourself into an offensive lineman, but it wouldn't be the best player in this draft class. And the issue for the Jaguars is that in 2 of the last 3 drafts, they've used a first-round pick on edge rushers, Josh Allen and Caleb Chason. So you can take another edge rusher for sure, and it'll help your team absolutely. But an outfit with so many needs, I don't know if taking 3 edge rushers in 4 draft classes in the first round is going to solve all the problems that this team has. Is it a step in the right direction? I suppose you could paint it that way, but I think you would love to be able to be in a situation to not have the first overall pick and have an opportunity for other teams to want to trade up should you be at pick 2, 3, or 4. And I don't envision a situation where there's going to be a team trading up to number 1, either for a quarterback or for one of these edge rushers, because this isn't the class to do it.
Yeah, I think you're hoping like the Lions or the Houston Texans just fall in love with one of the quarterbacks this draft class. Maybe the Carolina Panthers, they're in striking distance in the top 10. And you hope that they fall in love with one of these QBs and they'd be willing to trade up with you, given that you're not going to be in the quarterback market. More importantly, going to be in the coaching market looking for a head coach. But, as Brian kind of pointed out, the reality is, the Jaguars have many more problems than just obviously, firing their head coach and moving on from him. In fact, I think they've gotten worse since they fired Urban Meyer, if that was even possible. And so the hard part is how do you go about rebuilding? You need more draft picks. You need more young, talented players. And so, you're hoping that someone loves one of those quarterbacks or maybe loves another player enough to trade up and take him, whether it's Aiden Hutchinson or Kayvon Thibodeau. I mean, I don't know, again, what team that would be and how much they value that particular position if it's a non-quarterback edge rusher. But that would be the intent of the Jacksonville Jaguars, is one of these 2 guys is enticing enough or a piece that they feel like they just can't miss, and they're willing to give up something in order to move back and accumulate another pick. So the bottom line is the Jaguars being at number 1 for another year in a row. It's not what they hoped for, but, I mean, hey, look, here's the light at the end of the tunnel. You can look at the Cleveland Browns, who had back-to-back number 1 overall picks. It wasn't necessarily in this order, but Myles Garrett and Baker Mayfield. And look how it turned out. They're a team that's now competing for playoff spots and competing for the division, even though it seems like an outside shot now. But it did drastically improve that roster. So maybe you look at that logic and say, hey, we'll throw in another edge rusher up front, make it a really tough team to go up against defensively. And obviously, we've got our quarterback of the future. We'll keep building around him. Maybe that's more of the strategy there, Danny.
How about the aspect of they better get this pick right? Whether it's they take Aiden Hutchinson or Kayvon Thibodeau. I mean, these are players that have flip-flopped. Some people still have Thibodeau number 1. Do you like the potential, the upside that could be there in a raw talent? Or do you want somebody who's already been refined, but you do wonder, could Aiden Hutchinson be tapped out a little bit? You see this massive jump in production. They have to nail this pick, and chances are one of them's not going to be as great as you thought. So you better, and how do you trust this organization? Like, that's a complete mess right now. So there is a lot that Jacksonville has to address, a lot they've got to handle, and a lot they've got to get right, including if they are stuck with the number 1 pick, do they take the player that over the long haul is the best one? Because we mentioned the edge rushers they've taken. None of that matters if they miss on one of these 2. So there's a lot that's going to happen with Jacksonville over the course of the next few months as they prepare to select and what most likely is going to be the number 1 overall pick.
And this draft is not as sexy as drafts in the past because the quarterbacks aren't looked at as guys that you would take in the top 1 or 2 or 3 or maybe even 5. And Ryan, in this latest mock, your first quarterback goes off the board at 9. You do have 4 in the first round. You've had as little as 2 in some weeks that you've done your mock. Walk us through the thought process on which quarterbacks go where.
So we saw Washington struggle yesterday in that game against Dallas, and struggle is a nice word when you get 56 hung on you. It wasn't entirely Taylor Heineke's fault. He was coming off the COVID list. He admitted to being a little sluggish, and it showed for sure. So whether Heineke played well or not, I think at the end of the day, they will be looking for a quarterback. Matt Corral, if he's there at 9, I would imagine they would take a long look at him there because he is, in my mind, QB1. The race will probably tighten up as we go through the pre-draft process, but he played extremely well at Ole Miss this year, much improved from the year before. You have to answer questions about how is that Lane Kiffin offense going to translate to the next level, but he's extremely athletic. He has good arm strength. He's undersized. He's 6'1", is what he's listed at. He might be a little shorter than that in real life. So we'll find out. Kenny Pickett, I know Brady loves Kenny Pickett. Huge season this year for Pitt. Did himself a huge service by coming back and playing the way he played. We'll see what the hand size looks like. It's supposed to be sub-9. I will be interested to hear what Danny and Brady say about that because NFL teams will glom onto that, and it could be a talking point, even though we saw him play extremely well week in, week out. And finally, Malik Willis at the bottom of the first round. I think he has the potential to be the highest riser, quote-unquote, in the eyes of the media as we go through the draft process because he is so extremely athletic. Great arm. He can run. In a lot of ways, he reminds me of Russell Wilson, early versions of Russell Wilson, but he's also extremely raw. So you have to draft him with the understanding that he cannot play right away. So those are 3 guys ahead going this week in the mock draft, Chris.
Yeah, I think Malik Willis is one of the most interesting prospects or intriguing prospects, I should say, in this draft, especially at the quarterback position when you look at this entire group. He oozes with athleticism and ability, especially in a game now where if he's getting drafted in the first round, depending on who ends up taking him, probably got some offensive line issues. So you're going to have a quarterback with some dual threat or some mobility to his game. He's also got a rocket for an arm. I think the biggest thing that I see from his play that concerns me is just overall accuracy. He's not one of the more accurate quarterbacks in comparison to, for example, Russell Wilson, who Ryan just made the comparison to. I mean, you go back through Russell Wilson's tape at NC State, the guy was an accurate quarterback. Then he goes to Wisconsin, accurate quarterback. I mean, he had those skills his entire time. Malik Willis, you don't see that quite as much in regards to ball placement and things that truly matter when you look at the NFL level and how tight some of those throws and windows are. You don't see it quite as much on tape in comparison to what you see from Matt Corral or what you see from Kenny Pickett, who I think Kenny Pickett's the best in the draft. Now, to address the hand size, conversation, none of it matters, especially if he's wearing gloves. I mean, it depends on how the ball comes out of his hand. So unless they outlaw, gloves at the NFL level, I suspect Kenny Pickett's probably going to wear 2 like he did this past year, and the ball will come out of his hand just as well as it has. So there's no concerns for me with that. I would be shocked if Kenny Pickett doesn't end up being the first quarterback taken in this draft, just based on the tape we saw this year. Because I think the tape trumps all, at least in my opinion, Danny.
It should always. The tape should always trump all. I mean, hand size I've never gotten into, but it is a factor. It is something teams look at. But with Pickett playing in Pittsburgh, you've got cold weather that he's had to deal with. You mentioned the gloves, does throw in those, and ball security hasn't been an issue that's risen any eyebrows yet. So if anybody does, they are nitpicking. Go look at the tape. What I do think is interesting in this is you do have some intangibles. Like, those are the hardest things. And I like Kenny Pickett a lot. I've liked everything I've heard from him. He's played a ton of football at Pitt, but he has opted out of his bowl game. And I know his offensive coordinator has has left to take the same position at Nebraska. And Kenny Pickett's going to opt out of their bowl game, big bowl game against Michigan State, where you've got an opportunity to have one last resonating performance. But more importantly, you put that next to Matt Corral, who's up there in front of the podium, and he's saying, I don't want to leave my guys behind. I want to finish what I started. I came here to finish something, so I'm going to do that for my teammates. That has made me inclined to look at Matt Corral and say, man, all right, if I'm going to look at a quarterback, like intangibles, leadership, what do I want to look for? That is enticing to me. And if I've always kind of posed it this way, you're not going to not draft a guy because he opts out, right? We've seen that plenty of times. But if you have 2 guys and the tape is close and you see equal kind of abilities, you know who I'm going to lean towards? I'm going to lean towards the guy that played his game. So I'll be fascinated to see if Matt Corral playing in his bowl game, if that puts him over the top and potentially has him the first quarterback taken in this draft.
3 quarterbacks taken in this latest mock draft from Ryan Wilson. I thought there were 4 because, Ryan, I was looking at your Christmas mock draft from just like 48 hours ago. You had Carson Strong going to the Lions at number 24. Did you have to work overtime on Christmas for another mock?
Chris, my whole life is working overtime. I don't get to enjoy the luxuries of you famous people at HQ. I'm the worker bee over here.
Well, you did that, so we're going to let you keep those Christmas trees up behind you, at least until after the new year. Ryan Wilson's full first-round mock and his Christmas mock special is on CBSSports.com right now. Our thanks to Ryan Wilson, Danny Cannell, and Brady Quinn here on CBS Sports HQ. Going to be seeing a lot of Will Brinson tonight, I'm told, on CBS Sports HQ. You can also hear him on the Pick 6 podcast, your daily NFL picks with Brinson and dem boys.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.